Hi guys, so I have another craft book review for you all. And first off, I'd like to say sorry if my nail polish and my sleeves are different in parts of the video because I'm going to be filming this in two parts because some of the things I made are gifts and I have to give them away. And secondly, I'd like to say that I have no idea how to read Japanese at all, any bit at all, and this entire book is in Japanese. So just warning you. So this is a Amigurumi Sanex book. So it has Sanex characters with directions on how to make their amigurumis. I got this book at a Japanese bookstore called Kinukunaya, and I got it for only $16.50. And I still have the tag. Apparently it was originally only about $10 in Japan. So here is what the cover looks like, and it has this little tiny sleeve thing at the bottom. I'm assuming it's some sort of advertisement for the book. I have no idea, but I've seen it on a lot of Japanese books, and majority of the time I just keep it off. It is a soft cover book, and it also has a cover that can be taken off, and the front is just yellow and simple, and there's a picture of Rilakkuma on it. And on the back it has this really cute illustration of Rilakkuma and Korilakkuma wrapped up in some yarn, which is totally adorable. So I'd just like to say that before I purchased this book, I had no idea how to read Japanese crocheting patterns. The crocheting patterns I'm used to are a long list of instructions, much like this, but these ones, however, are circular patterns, and they teach you how to work the round in chart form. I had no idea how to do that before, but since I know a few things about crocheting, it was quick to learn. Very beginning of the book has detailed description on each character. And then starts the patterns. So the pages are numbered at the bottom, and at the very top of the patterns it tells you the page number of what you're trying to make. So if you go back to page 6, there's Kiiroitori, so page 6, Kiiroitori. So all through the rest of the book is the patterns for everything, and I like putting in a sticky note for the pattern and for what the final product will look like. That way I can reference them both. So the very first amigurumi I made from this book is Kutsusete Nyanko, and these two pages are the entire pattern just for the cat and also for the socks. This pattern right here is for the socks. So here is the Kutsusete Nyanko that I made. The only thing that I forgot to do, which kind of makes me really sad, is put the little butt asterisk on here. Right there, and it's also pictured right there as well. That's like one of my favorite things when I see animals, is to see their little butt. I think it's cute. But this pattern was fairly easy. The only thing that kind of threw me off was I thought it was going to end up being much smaller than it is. I thought it was going to be half this size, but this is the size it ends up being, and I think it's a nice medium-sized plush. The pattern for the head was something I had never seen before, and that is, instead of working immediately in a round, you work a chain and then do rounds around it, and that was something entirely new for me, and I think it worked out really well for my first time doing it. The head and the body and the legs were all fairly easy. It's just getting into the details for the eyes was a bit confusing because I don't know how to speak or read Japanese, so some of the patterns aren't labeled as fantastically as I thought it was, but there's a trick to it. If you look, each piece is labeled, so all you had to do is look up the character label for the pattern, and the character is right above there. And generally when it comes to color, they have it kind of gray tone shaded, so I could figure out the color differences and then go back to the pictures to figure out exactly what color I'm supposed to be using for the pieces. I also did a pattern for the socks that are included right down here, and I think these turned out pretty adorable. The pattern I used is actually the pattern I have in my Sweetorials tutorial, so I will leave a link down below for you guys to check that out. The best thing about reading these patterns is that numbers are universal. Numbers will not change with each language. Numbers are numbers. So for the chart, it tells you how many stitches are there, and then it tells you the row number, how many stitches you increase or decrease, and how many you should be left with. So it's easy to count and double check and make sure that you have the right stitches as you're going along. For the actual diagram directions, it numbers off the rows here, and you start from the number and go from right to left in a counterclockwise sequence, so it is easy that way. The only thing I had a really hard time doing was trying to figure out some of the symbols. At first I knew the X's were stitches, and then it took me a while to realize that the X's with the arrows on them are increases and decreases. The symbol means both of them. And there were a few symbols that I was not familiar with, so I actually went online and looked up a table, which I will leave the link down below, which is very, very helpful, and it lets you know what these symbols are, because these are the first times I've ever seen these. So for Christmas gifts, I decided to make the Rilakkuma series in the Santa hats. So these plushies are the same exact plushies as these ones, and these ones, and the ones in the very beginning. It's just that they have Santa hats, which are an extra add-on pattern, which is in a separate page of the book. So here is the pattern for Kiiroitori. Here is the pattern for Rilakkuma, including this section here. Here is the pattern for Korilakkuma, including this section here. And it isn't until we get to page 46 and 47 that we see the Christmas specific ones. So Rilakkuma's hat, Korilakkuma hat, Kiiroitori's hat, and then it teaches you how to do the Christmas wreath. So first I will show you Rilakkuma. I actually made 2 of these, and this is the first one I did, and this is the second one I did. I honestly think I did a better job the first time, but the pattern was a little hard to get used to because the ear was completely different than I would have thought it would have been. The bottom part is actually a hole, and I thought it was going to be a full circle, but yeah, there's a lot of little components to it, but once you get used to it, it becomes second nature to do it again. the full Rilakkuma looks like. It has a zipper and a tail in the back, and the pads on the paws are a separate pattern as the tummy and the muzzle. The ears are a separate pattern, and then of course the hat is separate and you stitch it on. The only thing I really had a problem with was the face. I have no idea how I was supposed to do it. There's no real directions like these graphs for the face. It just has a little bit of information right here, and the information is all in Japanese, so I have no idea what exactly I'm supposed to do. I tried winging it and just stitching as if I was embroidering, but with black yarn, and it ended up looking awful. So instead I just decided to use scribbles, and I think it looks just as good with the scribbles. Not as good on this face as it does on this one, but you know, I tried my best. So here is the Korilakkuma, and this one was pretty much the same amount as the Rilakkuma, but in a smaller version. The pattern was very, very similar, except instead of the zipper in the back, there is a button. They didn't really add this little bit in the pattern, but I decided to stitch on with actual embroidery floss the little X for the button. I think it added a nice detail. And the Christmas hat pattern is the exact same. The only thing I changed up is the color to a dark pink, because I think Korilakkuma loves her pink. So I had the same problem with the face, but as I did before, I just added the scribbles, and I think it's alright. It's passable, I guess. After I was done with the Korilakkuma was just as easy to make because it was shorter. And here is a size comparison between the two. Rilakkuma is obviously larger, and the hat is even larger, so it wasn't until I got to Kiiroitori that I really started hating the pattern that I received. I think this turned out awful. It looks nothing like the original picture in the book. I don't even know how this pattern came from this one. It's just so horrendous. I just don't understand. The body shape was fine. The wings were okay, but it wasn't until I got to the mouth that I noticed it wasn't looking as if it should have. The mouth pattern is actually this one right here. And as you can see, it is just a circle and a line of chains, which is this, a circle and a line of chains. But as I said before, I do not understand Japanese, so I had no idea how to attach a circle and a line of chains to end up looking like this picture, because these two do not look the same at all. It is hideous, and the same thing goes for the hair. I don't understand how 4 chains can equal this and look nice. And same with the feet. I hate the feet as well. Of course, I try to spiff it up and make it Christmas themed. For Kiiroitori, there's actually supposed to be a Santa hat like Korilakkuma and Rilakkuma, but I figured, what's the point of making a Santa hat if it's just gonna cover up? Like, what's the point of doing these if the Santa hat is just going to cover it up? So I decided to take the Kutsusete Nyanko sock pattern and make it a Christmas stocking. So I added a couple extra chains and attached it to his little wing, and I gave him a little spiffy bow tie to try and salvage this piece. Personally, I hate it so much. It's kind of cute, I guess, but I'm probably never gonna make this pattern again. I think this was a total flaw. this final product looks nothing like the Kiiroitori illustration they have in the book. So this was one downside to this book. After being frustrated with that ridiculous duck, I decided to try something really simple, and I went with the Monokuro Boo pig. The pattern is super simple. It's supposed to be just 2 squares, 1 big rectangle, and little feetsies and ears are the same pattern, and the mouth. However, this pattern ended up having a lot of problems as well. For the main square, it has the bottom of 15 stitches, but then it only has 12 rows, and in the end it ended up being a weird rectangle shape instead of an actual square. So instead of doing 12, I ended up having to almost double it and do 22 for it to equal an actual square. And then of course I ran into the same problem with the side piece. It was 54 stitches across, and it was only supposed to be 14 rows, but I ended up having to do about 19 rows to make up for the extra space. And I have a picture of what they look like before I added the extra rows. So they definitely do not equal a cube. And then when I got the base of it finally done, and I started to make the limbs ended up being way too small as well, because the pattern for them is literally only 2 rows. So I had to bump up the rows for these. The ears and the legs ended up being 5 rows instead. And the nose is also only 2 rows, and I had to bump that up to 4 for it to all even out. Here is my finished Monokuro Boo pig, and I think it turned out really cute. It is also kind of big, but that's because I had to increase so much. But it is still a very, very simple pattern. I ended up making the eye pattern myself. I'm not exactly sure what you're supposed to do for the eyes because, like I've said before, I can't read that. But I just made a really simple round and then attached it to match with the nose, and I think it's really, really cute. And even the curly Q tail I think turned out super adorable, and the little feet are really cute as well. And I actually like my finished product much better than what is in the book. I think mine's a lot cuter. I like the placement of the eyes better. Also, going with the black and white theme, I ended up making the Teru Panda, and this is very, very big. I think this is the largest plush out of all the ones I made in the book, and it's pretty big. After finishing it, I realized that I had made a few mistakes within making this plush. Teru Panda is a very fat panda plush, so when I made the pattern, and it has a distinct shape, and I thought that this shape right here was its belly, but in all actuality it's supposed to be its butt, and this flat right here that I made its back is actually supposed to be its stomach. So this is backwards, and that's why the neck came out really weird. You can actually see through the neck because it has a lot of double and triple crochets, and it leaves gaps, and I really, really don't like that about the pattern. So I'm kind of glad it came out this way so I can squish the head and kind of cover that up. Also, in the illustration for this, its head is tilted this way, and in the actual picture it isn't, but I took advantage of that mess up and kind of stitched its arm down so its head always tilts like that. This pattern was very similar to the Kutsushitenyenko one, except it's more bean blobby shaped than cat shaped. And the eyes were a bit difficult, but once I got one down, the second one was easier. I might make this pattern again, but add some changes to the neck and make it correctly maybe next time, and actually have this as the front instead of the opposite, but it still came out really cute in my opinion. There are a lot of double patterns in this book. This one is Komo no Hashikomo, and they also have one for Rilakkuma where they have the standing version and then the lying down version. So I decided I would give one of the lying down versions a go, and I think this character is really cute. So I decided to make this one, and this is how it turned out. It is really cute and really tiny. It fits in the palm of my hand. But like the other patterns, there was some problems in making it. The only difference between the standing one and the laying down one is this pattern right here, which is the side arm. And for this side arm, as you can see, you don't add any on this side so that it gets like a little notch out of it so that it is easier to attach to the side of the plush right here. The main pattern that I was struggling with the most is the beak pattern. There's a lot of the double crochets. When you're making such a small plush, double crochets kind of leave gaps in between them, and they're pretty visible if you look close enough. You can see the gaps right here actually, and it's an interesting shape, and that's probably why the pattern is so weird, and also why I stitched it on crooked, but I still think it came out pretty cute. And it even has like this little question mark hair thing that is super adorable. But this is pretty much the equivalent of the Kiiroitori, but so much better. This pattern worked out. It was still frustrating like the Kiiroitori, but it worked out so much better. The last pattern that I made from this book, and the last one for this review, is Mamo-chan, one of the more popular San-X characters. This is my finished product. I really like the shape of this, but doing the pattern was actually very, very odd to me, because you would think that the nose part would be a separate part of the pattern like most of the other patterns in this book. But this was actually all one pattern. The tail was a separate pattern and the fins were a separate pattern, but the nose was all part of this. And it's done in a very interesting way, and a way that can be easily deformed looking if you don't poke it out correctly and take care into making the pattern. So within the pattern, you create the nose bump, and then after a while you stop making rows on here so that you can start making the flat part of the face. So that's what is in the pattern right here. You pretty much go back, stop, go back, stop, go back, stop. And then once you get the base shape of the face right here, you then continue to do all the way around to get this head shape, which I understand where they're coming from within that pattern, but because you had to skip and go back, there were a lot of weird misshapen stitches, and you can actually see it on the face very well. There is a hole right here that 3 stitches had to go into to then incorporate it into a new round, and so it left this kind of like hole right here. You can't really tell unless I point it out, but you kind of can if you have a good eye for it. So it does seem like a pretty simple pattern, but the face, the beginning, is the hardest part. I also kind of think that I made the eyes a little too far apart, but I still think it's really cute. And this book does come with patterns to make different costumes for Mamo-chan, which I think would be really fun to make to go with this guy. So sorry for the mixed quality and lighting and the really long length of this video. It was actually filmed in 2 parts, a couple years apart, so sorry for that. But to wrap it all up, I think this book has lots of great patterns in it, but I suggest it for someone who is intermediate in crocheting or amigurumi, and they want to bump up their game or learn a new type of pattern like I did when I first started using this book, or for someone that is would consider themselves an expert, because they will be able to read these patterns with no problem without even knowing Japanese. And I also suggest this for someone who can read Japanese and is an intermediate. This book is definitely not for beginners, but it does have a bunch of lovely patterns in it. So all in all, I would give this book a 4 out of 5. There were a few problems definitely with Kiiroitori, with some of the patterns, but there are a lot of good ones, and for having licensed characters, it is a really awesome book to have if you are a fan of these kawaii characters like I am. So that wraps up this book review. Hopefully you guys will be seeing another one next month, so stay tuned for that, and I will talk to you all later. Bye!